Hello and welcome to the How to Thrive podcast. This podcast is hosted by me, Claire Sanders, and my sister and co-founder, Helen Silver-McMahon. Together, we are on a mission to empower individuals and teams with the human skills they need to thrive, maximising performance, minimising risk, and optimising well-being. If you'd like to find out more about how we can help your practice, please get in touch via our website, www.being-human.co.uk. I'd like to take a moment to say a huge thank you to our sponsors for the How to Thrive podcast, Flank. Flank is your in-house legal team's first AI colleague. Flank introduces AI native agents who are designed to integrate seamlessly into your existing systems, empowering legal teams like yours to work smarter. They instantly resolve commercial team requests, eliminate bottlenecks, and enable your legal team to operate at the speed the business needs. But this is just the beginning. At Flank, they firmly believe that the future isn't simply about better software. It's about building towards a future where fully autonomous AI colleagues will own entire workflows end to end, deeply embedded into your tools and systems. This is the new generation agentic engine that's redefining what's possible for in-house legal. If you'd like to find out more about Flank, have a look at getflank.ai. And if you get in touch with them, please do mention How to Thrive, so that they know that it came from one of our wonderful listeners. I would rock up to an event 1 minute before it started with my BlackBerry thinking I'm very important here. I've got loads of emails, had no emails, so just messing around. So I didn't have to talk to anybody. Hello, Helen. How are you doing?
Well, hello. I am very well, thank you. Very well.
It is only 3:15. It has only taken us 15 wholesome minutes to get to the point where we are ready to record.
Yes.
Listeners, I think this might be, well, actually, it's a record for how long it's taken us.
Yes.
First of all, I logged on to hear Helen screaming at the dog in a loving way.
Screaming sounds incivil. I feel it was justified.
It was setting boundaries. That's what you were in a very authoritative manner. So that was good, setting your boundaries. And then my computer crashed, decided it wasn't working anymore. And then Helen realised we were recording this on a video, and I just can't stop looking at how red my cheeks are. I don't know what that is. That's not a sunburn. Maybe it's windburn. Anyway, but we're here eventually, Helen. 3:15. We've made it.
I know.
But how generally are you, apart from the fun?
How am I? Yes, I'm. Well, to be honest with you, I've been a bit cheesed off with the weather this weekend, and I know that's very British of me, but I like the good weather, and I tend to schedule my whole entire relaxation. So when it starts raining on days that I've got off, I get a bit cheesed off. I had a very busy week last week, very exciting, but very busy. So I had, but the weather turned round at the last minute and was nice, so managed to do lots of wholesome things outside.
Was it?
Yeah. No rain, no thunderstorms.
Oh my word!
Yeah,
it was torrential here on Saturday, but I took that as an omen. And this is exciting chat for our listeners. I cleaned for the whole of Saturday afternoon with my two little adorable children wanting to help me, which basically just means emptying a bottle of spray on any object that was available. But I encouraged it, and we cleaned, so that was nice, wasn't it?
That is lovely. We did some really nice things. We went for a really long walk with the dog, and then we went on the train to our local farmers market, which was really lovely. Chose fresh produce. Our plan was to forage at the farmers market for our dinner. Okay, so
I thought you meant forage in like your local countryside. I'm laughing, listeners, because I can't imagine it.
No, I don't think that would have worked out. So basically the foraging didn't really work out either. So we went to the farmer's market, which was amazing. Please excuse Cookie. She's now barking. If you can hear that, I'm terribly sorry. My stern words obviously had no impact, usual. She's to add context. This at 3:15 in the afternoon, she begins her daily ritual on a school day of reprimanding any child, dog, person that dares to walk past our house, because we are quite close to a school. Anyway, I digress. So we went to the farmer's market, and my plan was to buy some things for the farmer's market with which I could create some food for dinner, some nice dinner. And I had in my mind's eye what I was going to buy, and the stall that I thought would be there was not there, so we went to the pub for a roast.
I love it. So less foraging, more just, well, I suppose it's foraging of a sort. You foraged away to the pub?
Yeah. We foraged some very lovely food, so I was happy with my foraging.
Well done.
We got some
Well
nice
done.
British strawberries for dessert, which we had when we got home. So there was some foraging that was successful. I also bought some asparagus, which I believe is in season, and they do have lovely asparagus in Norfolk, which is not very far away. I haven't eaten that yet.
This is all very exciting chat. I mean, like, I don't want us to peak
listeners
too
will
soon.
want to know.
No, I think, they're by now, if they haven't switched off, maybe they will. But don't switch off, listeners. Carry on listening, because there is actually some planned content for today. Not a guest, no guests today. Just the lovely Helen and me waffling on. But we are going to waffle on a very specific topic today, and that is connection. Because we realised that we haven't spoken about this on the podcast. And for a long time, I was trying to find, or we're looking for somebody who ran a community who would like to come and talk to us about connection. But despite reaching out to a few different people, I struggled to find someone to come on. And then it dawned on me yesterday as I was walking Pip that actually I run a community, as does Helen. And we both have a real penchant for connection. So we're going to talk about connection today, why it's necessary, why it's needed, why going to those events, and we're in full event season at the moment in legal, and I'm not sure event season ever ends in the vet world. Why it's not skiving, because I think a few people think of going to events as skiving, like why that connection is really important. So that's the topic for today. How does that sound, Helen? You up for it?
Sounds really good. I think it's so important though, right? I think it's something that maybe we're not as good at as we used to be. I think everyone having to work at home during COVID, we've become more comfy in our own little bubbles, in our own little worlds, and sometimes that can make it harder to step outside that comfort zone, out of our pajama bottoms, which I still occasionally wear on Zoom calls. I'm not wearing them now.
She has got other bottoms on though. I feel like we should qualify.
No bottoms on today. No, I have got. I've got bloody bottoms on. Yeah, but we don't. It was weird, right? We couldn't connect with other people, and I really missed that during COVID, and having such a limited amount of connection, and swapping to speaking on FaceTime to some of your closest friends, or waving to neighbours on the doorstep when we all went out and clapped for the NHS, things like that. It was strange times, but I think it'd be easy to think, well, we survived, right? But actually, were we thriving, and why do we need connection as humans? Do we need connection as humans?
Well, let's start off with that. Like, do we need connection as humans? Why do we need connection like humans? From a psychological perspective, like, do we need connections? Can we just be isolated individuals?
Yeah. Yes, I think the answer is that we do need connection. I think that when we've looked at human needs, so we know that one of the first kind of models of human needs was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And that kind of details that after physiological needs, sort of the need for sleep, water, food, those kind of things. Then we have safety and security. And then after that, we have belonging. Actually feeling belonging within society is obviously something that we need other people to have. And when you go on to look at other kind of psychological models of needs of humans, connection is pretty much almost always mentioned as something that's a fundamental human need, that we need each other to communicate, to survive, really.
And I guess that comes down, it makes sense, right? We're pack animals. We are tribal, and so our survival as a gene pool absolutely was essential, that we were all working together and we were part of a pack. If we were on our own, then the chances are that we would have been eaten by a saber-toothed tiger, because it would be very hard to defend ourselves. So our future, more so then, like more starkly in prehistoric years, it was essential that we were together, that we were connected, that we knew what people were doing and if they had our back. And I guess more than that as well, we were probably very much a team, in terms of we were connected as a team, and in terms of different people had different roles, much more defined roles, I suppose, in society.
I guess you look at maybe third world or developing countries, and you probably see that still more prevalently. So you'd see people still functioning in tribes, in communities, more than perhaps the Western world. I think the Western world is probably, this is a way that perhaps we've evolved that's maybe not so good. But I think it does come down to a personal preference as well. Just because you and I quite like connection, I guess there are some people who actually really don't like connection and would be preferring to be solitary. But I think generally when we get people together, we always feel the benefit of that group, that connection, that ability to share ideas, widen the pool of wisdom.
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? Let's focus on the pool of wisdom, shall we? Just for a moment, which is essentially we talk about, and this is exactly really why we are cross industry and we use learnings from different industries, because together, if we pool everything we know, but also all the challenges we've faced and all the failures we've had, and we pool all of that and we communicate it all together, we will be we'll have a richer knowledge bank that we can draw on. And so it's only really by being connected to other people that you have the benefit of dipping into that pool of wisdom. Because if you're not connected to people, then you can't talk to them, you can't ask them, you can't get the benefit of their experience.
No, exactly. Sometimes it'd be easy to think, well, I can ask Google perhaps, or I can get ChatGPT to help me, or, other internet providers and search engines are available. But actually, how can we interrogate that? How can we find out other people's lived experience? It's only by making those connections and chatting to people that we really learn what it's like, and can take from what we want to, and then decide whether that's something we want to implement in what we do or not.
Yeah. And then I suppose the question about, physical, can virtual connection ever replace physical connection? And I'm always reminded when I think of this is Andy Cope, who spoke at the Vet How to Thrive last year, in his 7-second hug, and how much, the transfer of energy and transfer of, energy, I suppose, between one person and another takes 7 seconds. And I think it is very different, and it's a very different type of connection when it's virtual. In person has many other benefits, including the fact that you can read people's body language better, that there is this transfer of almost chemicals like hormones between us, and it's very hard to do that when you've got a screen between you. It just doesn't happen as naturally. And also I think the tendency when you've got a screen is that people are in a hurry. You've got an allotted time. There's not that time to walk from one place to another or just to grab that cup of tea. It's like you've got an allotted half-hour window on Teams or Zoom, and you've got to fit everything into that. The small talk and that time when there is connection beyond professional is missing.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think it would be easy. Again, it would be easy to think that we were doing the same thing, but reality is, I don't think we possibly can online. I think it's, and you think about when you go to a conference, like you think of virtual events online, it's just not the same, not even the same ballpark, is it? When you think about, when they do any kind of networking, you never kind of have that just relaxed connection with somebody that's kind of serendipitous. It all has to be like orchestrated and organized, and it can feel really false and really difficult and really uncomfortable. And then, are we really bringing our best selves to the table, or are we bringing kind of our prepared selves, and what does that look like? And
and there's something very special, I think, about when you're in a conference or when you're at an event or just when you're in a classroom even, that you're all going through exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. And I think, and that kind of in it together feel, you're both all on the same journey is, and I know you could argue potentially that you could feel like that virtually, but I don't think you do. You just don't have that energy. You can't feel the energy between people. And it's, from a facilitator's perspective, it's much harder to facilitate a space for learning online virtually than it is in person. So I think there is a real impact for sure. And I mean, from a resilience perspective, it's also incredibly important. I mean, we talk about 6 pillars of resilience, and one of them is connection, and having this connection with people who are going through exactly the same thing as you at exactly the moment. And one of the examples I use is this research that was done following 9/11. And they looked at the recovery rates for those who were victims of 9/11 who were directly involved, and so that was like citizens, and then people who were in the emergency services. And they looked at kind of the recovery rates from PTSD and from the mental trauma that people had experienced. And what they found was that it was the people from the emergency services were recovering much more fully and much quicker than your normal everyday man on the street who'd experienced it. And when they did a deep dive into why that was, it was because actually the emergency services had this inbuilt community of people who had gone through exactly the same thing as them at the same time. So they were able to go back and everybody could be in the same place as them and kind of empathize with them and sit with them and understand what they were going through. Whereas, you know, the individuals, the general public, would go home and of course their families and friends were trying their hardest to offer their support, but without having actually experienced the horrendous atrocities, you couldn't really get close to sitting in the same space as them. So it has a huge benefit for your resilience as well and your well-being. I mean, we talk to, you know, when we talk to lawyers, I make this point, especially with junior lawyers, you know, how fortunate many of them are to have, especially in private practice, they join as a cohort, they join as trainees, and they stay as trainees through the first 2 years of their training contract. But then, you know, I'm still friends now with people who I was a trainee with. But the special thing about that is there's no one else in the firm who's going through exactly what you're going through in that moment other than those other trainees. And so no one else has got the same first day as them, the first kind of trying to find the cafe or trying to find the loos or whatever it is. So there's this real strength that comes from that and binds you. And I think that's incredibly valuable but is very easy to underestimate.
Definitely. I've just finished reading a really interesting book about this, actually. It's a book called The Women. I forget the author now, but it's basically about women who were nurses in Vietnam and who went to the front line. And then when they came back, because of the way that the media had portrayed the Vietnam War, they said that no women had been in Vietnam, and so they didn't have any support network. In fact, they were completely denied. So when soldiers came back, when the men came back, they were kind of really celebrated because of their the work that they'd done, the role that they played. But when any women tried to seek help, if they went to like a veterans association or something like that, they were told that actually you weren't there. There were no women in Vietnam. You were not there. And so they had no support structure. And it took a long time for people to begin to realise that actually there had been women in Vietnam, there had been nurses in Vietnam, and they were deeply impacted because whilst they were not fighting, they were in the hospitals dealing with people who are coming in with very, very serious industries and seeing a lot of mortality. And you know, the effect that they had on the nurses was profound, absolutely profound. But with no community, it was horrendous. And, you know, they really relied on the people that they had known when they were out there because they were the only community that they had.
Wow, it's really interesting. And I think as well, in the way that, because of the way that society is kind of established now, we have to look beyond our immediate physical community really for that ultimate connection. So I suppose in years gone past, you know, your village might have been your community, might have been your most, you know, that you could relate to most things you were going through. But as we've got a bit more, I guess, a bit more adventurous, maybe is the word, or, you know, we've kind of expanded our territory and expanded our experiences, and now the world is our oyster. You know, you have to look elsewhere for your community. And I think there's also this aspect, and I know I've spoken about the Let Them theory by Mel Robbins, but she talks also about friendships and about adult friendships, and about one of the key drivers for adult friendships is about this proximity in experiences. So it's not just about, you know, proximity in space, but it's about proximity in experiences and about the need to be going through the same thing at the same time. I mean, I laugh, but I remember that when I had really small kids, like babies, and I'd say to you, like, what did you do in this situation? You'd be like, I don't know, I can't remember. And at the time I was like, how can you possibly not remember about teething? I need a solution. And now I'm like got a 6 and 8 year old, and people ask me the question, I'm like, I've got no idea. I can't remember at all. You just sort of block it out. But I guess my point being that they might be really good friends of mine, like we're really close, but actually in that moment, you were fairly useless to me as kind of a community of kind of knowledge for you were, and not useful in other ways, but not in how to solve midnight crying for teething.
But I don't think I think you could ask many people. I don't think there is a solution for that sometimes.
No, there's no solution. There's no solution. Just grin and bear it. So I suppose, but that again, when you look at parent groups like NCT or whatever other matters it's might, that's all about just going through the same thing at the same time, and I think that's why it's really important, and that's why I know that certainly I've worked for businesses where I've been the sole counsel and I've been the only lawyer. And so I've really needed to dip into those communities, because actually, without wanting to feel like, and we spend quite a lot of time telling lawyers that they're not special, but, it is got a unique challenges. And so you need that kind of that army behind you, the other people to float ideas around with for your own well-being. But it's not just your own well-being. And maybe this is something we talk about now as well, because actually it's about that transfer of knowledge, and it's about you've got to be able to transfer knowledge. And if you're isolated, you don't have that ability.
No, exactly. And you don't know what you don't know. The simple thing is that you until you actually look outside your village and start asking people questions, you'll never have any idea of what the experience of somebody else is. And personally, for me, I really love going to events where I meet new people, connect with people I already know, and I find them really energizing, really exciting, and a massive opportunity to learn, to grow, to be curious, to understand different perspectives, to connect with people who perhaps I would never otherwise get the opportunity to connect, and really just find out what I don't know about stuff and broaden that community of practice that we have.
And it's fascinating, like talking to people who have different experiences, just anybody actually, I found truly fascinating. But what about connection then within teams? So there's connection with, there's connection with people within your professional experience, if you like, or within your proximity in terms of your life proximity. But in terms of connection amongst teams, so different roles within teams, but I mean, is equally important when we talk about psychological safety. I mean, being connected as a team is essential.
Yeah. And I think taking time to realise that, what are the things that we can do to enhance teamwork, and what are the things that we can do which would degrade teamwork? And, how does that play into the culture of where we work? And do we have a good connection? I mean, lots of people say that actually if you've got a team that are closely bonded, that maybe socialise well together, outside of work, they have, you have fun together. A lot of that can add to a real sense of team, and can really elevate performance. I think there's also that question over teams being strengthened over adversity and kind of stepping up to form a really cohesive unit in times of struggle. And I know that we've talked about that from the generation perspective of, we at a conference recently, we both were listening to somebody talking about, actually to get Gen Z particularly motivated, it might be that they need to connect over a global concern, and kind of be invigorated by that sense of purpose for one sort of mission or what have you. But I guess that also comes with that connection and understanding of each other's purposes, or our purpose, and how we work together, and that how, if we can understand what people are driven by and what they like and what they dislike, then we're more likely to be able to work with their needs and kind of see them as individuals within a team, but also get them to function at their best within a team.
I suppose one of the challenges that, and I'd be interested for your view on this, but sometimes the challenges you see or you hear is that when teams hang out together and are really matey, it becomes quite hard then to maintain a level of accountability, because you're all mates basically, and then it's harder for someone to give you maybe feedback or that might be difficult, or tell you when you've stepped out of line or anything like that. I mean, have you got any tips for that?
That's a good question, actually. Yeah, I think there's always that need to have a separation between professional self and personal self. And I think from a leadership perspective, I would say that was definitely a challenge. People being, maybe regarded more as a friend and somebody you don't have to particularly take seriously versus actually the person who's leading you. So that's definitely something that leaders come to me and ask me about. How do we begin to lead friends? And I guess my advice for that would be to make sure that they understand that sometimes you are their friend and sometimes you are their leader, and sometimes you'll need to ask them which person they want to show up in this particular situation to make sure that they get their needs met. But I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think also the whole thing about cliques. We've all probably worked in environments where you've had people who are very, very friendly, and it can be quite exclusive. It can be kind of feel like people are put on the outside of that. So I think it's having the emotional intelligence to recognise when things like that are happening, and actually all of us remain accountable to stepping outside and saying, hang on a second, this is not how we show up as a team. Actually, we need to be inclusive and welcome people in and to share their knowledge in the pool of wisdom so that we can actually create a stronger team, and maybe keep those friendships that are really strong for outside work, or make sure that they still respect professional boundaries in workspace. But lots to navigate, definitely.
I mean, huge amount to navigate, because I was just reminded about a conversation I had about, we talk about, to build, this brave space, this psychological safety, which we know from Google's research is absolutely fundamental to high-performing teams. I've spoken to people before where they've almost been criticised for being too vulnerable and, demonstrated being too open in the workplace, and it's made people feel uneasy. So it feels like it is actually a real tightrope that you're trying to you're trying to balance against. It's not easy, because there is that feeling that you have to open up, or ideally you would open up a bit so people feel like they really get to know you, and you are demonstrating your fallibility, you are demonstrating your vulnerability. People feel like they do know you, that you are safe for them to speak to. But equally, I guess for some people it'll have the opposite effect. It will just completely turn them off, and they're like, I don't relate to you at all. But then maybe that comes down to knowing your team and knowing the individuals in your team and knowing how they are and what drives them. And it comes back to this, psychometric testing maybe, and understanding.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
All that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's where psychometric testing really comes into its own, in that we are going to have different people who have different perspectives in every single team. The best thing that we can do is understand that, and understand how people like to be communicated with, how they are, and ask people to share their thoughts and perspectives and preferences. Because otherwise, if we haven't got the emotional intelligence to perceive, perhaps if somebody's beginning to feel uncomfortable, imagine we invite somebody to the pool of wisdom, we invite them to give their, we're curious, we're building psychological safety. Actually, if we don't respect that they might have a different perspective to us, or they have different perspectives, then we're then beginning to maybe take a step backwards. We're maybe thinking, I don't want to be here because this is making me feel really awkward, this kind of level of conversation, whether that's that everybody else around the pool is talking very directly, or maybe everybody's being very vulnerable, or maybe one person's being very vulnerable. And it could land differently, but I think that's, again, it comes back to that in person, be able to see people's body language, be able to pick up on those subtle clues that we can see when people are feeling uncomfortable, and then curiously explore why that person is maybe starting to behave in that way, and understand what we can do as a colleague to actually reduce that feeling of unease, and make it easier for them to step forward. Because I think it comes making me think of sort of incivility, and the fact that we know that things like inappropriate humour are types of incivility. So what if everybody finds something really incredibly funny, but except one person who finds it really, really upsetting? we need to have built that connection, that understanding in people's preferences, so that we actually can avoid doing that. Or if it does happen that you crack a joke that for some reason is really, not appropriate in front of a person because of their personal experiences, then you know what to do to put it right. You know how to have how to apologise properly, or how to have a compassionate conversation, all of those kind of things to maintain that connection, so that you kind of look at how you can build that connection, but also to keep it. Because I think all these things are really fragile. We all know that when we fall out with somebody, right, it's really hard to actually get things on an even keel really quickly again, unless you are humble and say, look, I'm really sorry that I wasn't my best self, and I'd like to make it better, that kind of thing. So
and ultimately we are all human and we do all make mistakes, and it's by recognizing those mistakes that we really learn. I think I'm reminded actually when you were talking about that episode of Friends where she takes up smoking just so she can join in that, the smoking chat. She can feel connected in that respect. And then I think about all those situations I've been in where I've worked in fairly male-dominated situations, and they're talking about football or sport, and I've got no idea, and you just automatically feel quite excluded. But equally, if it works for them, it shouldn't be like everyone should just. It's just about finding what works, I think, in the moment, isn't it? And understanding that what works for you might not work for others, and to be open. But that comes from the pool of wisdom works beautifully when everyone feels like they've got a voice and everyone can input their own individual experiences into it. And so it really does work in any business's favor to open up, carrying on with the analogy, opening up like the tap and letting it flow free. But that needs time and it needs investment.
No, definitely. And I think it starts with when you're interviewing and onboarding people as well, making sure you kind of set that expectation of, we want you to be part of this. We want you to be part of, the team. We want you to step forward and speak up when you have something that you want to share. And we want you to consciously get involved and invite people to do so. And if you can see somebody in the room who's not getting involved in a conversation, invite them to share their perspectives, because they might just not have found the window, the moment. We all know what it's like sometimes if you're not quite on it and you're talking with a whole bunch of people who are sort of really excited about something. You can find it really hard to find a way into the conversation to actually say anything, and you just sort of feel like you're kind of trying to jump in there, but it's not happening. I know that's certainly happened to me a lot in the past, where I've just kind of then sat back and thought, well, I can't get in anyway, so I'll just listen. That's fine.
So I won't. Yeah, and that's so true. And I mean, I suppose it's interesting because so tomorrow we do Wednesday, but we're going tomorrow. We've got our residential program. So for those, actually, when this comes out, it'll have happened. But we've got our first residential program, and it's about ethics in the legal industry. And we've obviously been planning the content, and one of the key things that we will be talking about is about actually, to be an ethical leader, you need to be building a brave space around you, a space where people will come and speak. Because I think you summed it up really nicely earlier. Maybe I'll let you talk about ripples and shadows, but
yeah,
it was a lovely way of explaining it.
Yeah, I think I was saying that just that as leaders, we cast the longest shadows, we create the biggest ripples on the pond, and if we don't bring people to the table and invite them to speak, and then are really firm with any negative behaviours that actually would degrade that, then I think that we're not really doing our job, so to speak. I think we need to make everybody accountable for, coming in and making other people feel that they can speak and speak up. Because I think in general, in the workplace, we want to encourage everybody to speak up. We know that there's loads of examples from safety critical industries where people haven't felt able to speak up and it's led to disaster. But actually, if we're talking about ethics, particularly if you're feeling ethically challenged, then it's really particularly important that we speak up and we have that, safety around that, being able to, as a non-negotiable, that we're going to speak up, that we're going to do the right thing. And as a leader, making sure that we make sure everybody is on the same page with us is just so important that it's.
But also just massively empowering because, we are only one person. So, and in an organisation, you need kind of, I would suggest, you need all hands on deck type scenario. You need everybody to feel that, be your eyes and your ears so that you're aware of what's going on. And if for that to be effective, those people need to be able to come to you and feel brave enough to do that, and like they're going to be listened. And so, no one can just exist on their own. No team is team might be one person, but it provides, a much bigger organization, and so everybody needs to be involved.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like they can be involved. So yeah, it permeates through almost every aspect, actually. And as we're discussing it, I just keep thinking, wow, actually, this is like connection is massive.
Yeah,
I think we knew that, but it really does, because you're talking about being connected not only with people maybe within your industry, but who aren't necessarily your own team, so that you feel like you've got this network of people going through the same thing as you at the same time. Plus being connected with people within the industry that might not be in your other team because you want their knowledge and you want to pool their knowledge. And then the importance of being connected with people within your team so that as a team, you're performing at your best. Like, it's all rooted with connection. And yet again, I think that's one of those skills that it's just assumed, maybe because it's seen as, one of our basic needs, that we can all do that and we all know how to connect effectively with each other and new people. And so we don't necessarily give it the time to really sit and think about it. And I think that's a really wasted opportunity, if I'm honest.
But I think the other thing is, I would guess that some people who know us would probably say, oh, well, you're quite extroverted. You've already said that you thrive on connection. You really enjoy it. But I think it's also really important to point out that actually it still drives anxiety in those moments where you enter a room where you don't know anybody. That doesn't go away. But I think when you become more practiced at it, you at least know how to start the conversation, or tips and tricks as to sort of to feel a little bit more relaxed in those environments.
I was the person at events. I would rock up to an event, like when in the early days of my profession, my career, I would rock up to like a training thing 1 minute before it started. It was the days of the BlackBerry. That's how long ago it was. And I would stand on the sidelines with my BlackBerry thinking, I'm very important here. I've got loads of emails, had no emails, so just messing around. So I didn't have to talk to anybody. And actually, it was only when someone sort of said to me that everyone's feeling the same. No one knows anyone in this room. And even if they do know someone, they might know one person. So actually, rocking up, and going, can I join this group? Or can I say hi? No one's going to look at you and think, you absolute weirdo. If anything, they're probably going to like, oh, thank God, someone's come and spoken to me. But that was really uncomfortable for me, really uncomfortable. But I think it's through that, but also through being human, if I'm honest. I was so interested in other people's experience and conversation. I had so many conversations on the way that I've just realised that how much you can learn about people. Should we give a shout out to Jack Pye?
Oh yeah, Jack Pye.
Jack Pye is this. I met Jack at was it VMG, a vet conference?
Yes.
And
yeah.
And I said, oh, this is Jack. And so I started talking to Jack, and he was a very nice and interesting person. And then Helen went, by the way, he won the postcode lottery. I was like, what? And then she was like, and then Helen said, tell him about lawn bowls. And then it turns out, what is he, some sort of champion at lawn bowls?
Yeah, champion lawn bowler. Yeah.
And then the more I spoke to him, I realised he was running the marathon, and he knew Craig Revel Horwood. And I was like, it was just so fascinating. And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm so glad that I've I've sat here and chatted to you.
His recent thing, which I'm completely addicted to, by the way, is that Jack's a vet nurse who specialises in imaging and is the king of ultrasonography within the vet nurse world. Absolutely amazing. Really, really lovely person. And he's now recently taken on gardening, but because he'd already kind of dipped his toe in influencing on Instagram. He now does his Friday garden roundup and gives you tips for the weekend and what you need to be doing in the garden. It's brilliant. I watch it every week and I love it. It's hilarious. So yeah.
But you just don't know, right? You don't know about any of this stuff unless you kind of have this conversation. The other thing that always blows my mind is this kind of how connected we all are, like physically connected to people. You'll have a conversation like, do you know so-and-so? And, oh my God, yeah, I know so-and-so. So yeah, you have to have those conversations. Otherwise you don't get that rich, full experience.
I was on the train the other day and I love trains for random connection. Like just I always say hello to people if like there was two things that happened on my train journey last week. One of them was that a lady sat opposite me and she was struggling to put her bag in the overhead thing. So I said to her, would you like a hand? And she said, oh no, I don't think there's anybody sitting next to me. So I'll put it here. And I said, well, if you need to move it, then just give me a shout. I'll help you. And so then we get chatting and I said, she said, it's been a long journey. And I said, where have you been? And she said, I've come from Lisbon, as in Lisbon in Portugal. Anyway, the conversation went on and she pulled out a thing of, she'd just been and bought before she flew some Portuguese pasta natal.
Tarts, yeah.
I love. And I was like, oh my goodness, are they like Portuguese tarts? And she was like, yeah, do you want some? And I was like, this is a win. And then I was getting off the train and, when you kind of get up, in context, it was 6 hours on a train, got up and, when you'd like stiff legs, square bum and the whole rest of it. And there was a lady kind of getting up for a seat near me, getting off the train. And so I said to her, it's good to stand up, isn't it? And she said, oh, yes, it is. And then she started just chatting. And the more I chatted to her, I realised that I knew this lady. And so I ended up saying to her, did you used to be a teacher? And she said, yes. And it was one of our teachers from school, Mrs. Paul, who used to teach us business studies.
Was it?
And, it would have been really easy for me not to have made any stupid small talk. But then we just sort of chatted and it was actually really lovely. But, I think those serendipitous moments of connection are just really lovely. So, yeah.
Yeah. Top 3 tips then. With our guests, we talk about top 3 tips for thriving. But should we come up with some top 3 tips for connection or top 3 tips for how to grow connection?
I would probably say my first one would be get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, as in just take like the first step. Sometimes
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Exactly, as Jodie would say. That I think it would be easy to talk yourself out of doing something, and you'll miss out. So I would say just get that first little feeling of just like the first time you say hello to somebody, or don't be afraid to do it, because actually it could be really impactful. And I think my second tip would be go back to, in those kind of situations of networking, would be when we had Charlie on the podcast a little while ago. He talked about asking people, what made a really good day for them, or what would you be doing if you weren't doing, if you could do anything today with no limitations. And I think that's really nice, because I think sometimes when we go to work events, where it's kind of like, so what do you do? And then you get into this really dull, like, well, I do this and work. Whereas if you say to somebody, what would be your best day, then you have a completely different conversation. It might circle back to work stuff, but actually in the meantime, you've got loads of touch points with somebody that you just know a little bit more about them. And you
also shows that you're really interested in them.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is really valuable.
And probably my last one would be a tip for at work is notice when people are not at the table, when people are not speaking, and invite them. Be that person who is curious and invites people to speak up, because we've all been in that situation before, haven't we, where we felt that we couldn't speak up. And sometimes we just need somebody to kind of give us the okay to turn our tap on, and then we'll be able to do it.
I was just thinking, I would say making yourself accessible, but physically as well as, it's a bit dodgy, doesn't it? But making yourself accessible physically. So I mean, in like a work context,
yes,
not hiding away in a corner with your AirPods in and your screen up and just being totally inaccessible. And there may be moments where that is required because you're in deep thinking time, deep focus time, but actually positioning yourself somewhere where people feel that you are open and accessible and available for conversation, I think is really important. You probably covered this a bit, but just be interested, just be curious, just ask questions. Remember that people love talking about themselves, and you don't have to be, you don't have to be underhand with that, but people love it. Just ask, about anything. What do they do at the weekend? You'll be able to read their body language. If they think you're being like really nosy, then you'll be able to read that, hopefully. But just ask lots of questions about them and be curious, and then try and remember it as well. I think that's really important, so that you can ask them about those things at a later point, which I think could be really interesting and helpful. And then the third point about connection is to not, when there are events coming up and there are things coming up that you want to go to with work, really sit and think about the benefit, because I think sometimes in this day and age, it's very easy for businesses to say, no, I haven't got the time for you to go, or, what are you going to get out of that? And I think sometimes it can be easy to feel quite flustered in that moment and be like, I don't know. So go prepared for that conversation, even if it's not a conversation that happens. Kind of go prepared with, I want to go to this event because I want to learn about this, but also don't excuse the fact if you're just going to an event to connect with other people within the industry. Like, that is not a reason not to go to an event. That's still not skiving. It's really important both for you as an individual, but also for you as a professional, because it will come back and grow your business. So I think those would be my three.
Yeah,
I think
I like them.
So really interesting. So the connection, that's such an important topic. It's why it's funny, because I think this feels like we've just set up the last 40 odd minutes to be a plug for everything that we're doing, where people can come and physically connect. It's not. It's one of the conversations that we've wanted to have for a while, but it's also the reason why we host events, because we can do online masterclasses, but we truly believe that actually it's the energy when people come together in a room is second to none. And actually, it's really important topics that people are bonding over and growing relationships over, which is exactly why we, host the impersonal things. So we've got, from the legal aspect, we've got a summer social on the 9th of July. And then we've got our 2 flagship events. We've got VET is on the 12th of September in Birmingham. And the legal one will be on the 7th of September in London. And so for those are all really brilliant opportunities to come along and meet fellow lawyers, fellow in-house lawyers from the legal sector, fellow vet professionals from the vet sector, and just come and get together and share thoughts, ideas.
Hopefully have a little bit of fun, a little bit of learning, a little bit of connection, just, all of those things that actually hopefully help us thrive.
Exactly. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you, Helen, when we got there.
Yeah, when we got there.
Cookie's been muted. Humanely, she's gone for cuddles, not Helen didn't.
Could be struggle cuddles, but
struggle cuddles. 7 seconds. But yeah, so always a pleasure. Really, really good conversation. I'm glad we've had it, because I think it's one of those things. Connection is so important in so many aspects, but like so much, it's very easy to underestimate its power. So what have we got coming up the rest of the week, Helen? Well, you're with me in Birmingham for the
ethical leader.
The ethical leader. But then what do you, after that, you're still in Birmingham?
Still in Birmingham, just moving location very slightly. Probably slightly less glamorous than the first location, if I'm honest. But everyone loves the NEC, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, I will be at the NEC at BVA Live, and I'm on a panel talking about leadership. So that'll be cool.
Awesome. Well, it's a full-on week. Another full-on week. But
I know.
It's all very
but
exciting
soon be summer
stuff.
holidays, and then the expanse.
Then it'll be full-on week.
Us.
Yeah. But it's really exciting stuff. Well, I think that's probably a wrap, is it? Should we say goodbye? Thanks very much, everybody, for listening. As always, please like, follow, subscribe, all the rest of the good stuff, because it does help us demonstrate that people are listening. Or maybe no one is listening, and that's why no one likes, follows, or subscribes.
I think some people
Awkward.
do, though.
I think they do. But regardless, I just like chatting to you about, these topics. So, if you're listening, like, follow, subscribe. And if you're not, well, you don't know, do you? On that bombshell, speak to you soon.
Toodaloo.
Just before we say goodbye, I'd like to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to Flank, our sponsor for the How to Thrive podcast. Without their support, it would be much, much harder for us to share the wonderful learnings from our guests. So thank you so much, Flank. And if you'd like to find out more about how they can support your legal operations, please go to getflank.ai. If you enjoyed the podcast, please check out our website at www.being-human.co.uk to find out how we can support you and your team to thrive.